to talk about something I see very consistently in people who are genuinely doing that inner work and trying to apply it to their lives to create the reality they desire. These are the people who are reflective, they're self aware, they actively pay attention to themselves. They're not just waiting around for change to happen to them, they are engaging with their thoughts, with their patterns, and with the way they show up. And yet their experience can still feel inconsistent. So things might feel like they're moving forward for a while and gaining good momentum, but over time, things start to slow down and the confidence starts to feel less steady. They notice themselves becoming more watchful, more mentally involved again in trying to keep things on track in their 3D reality. It does not feel like everything is collapsing, but it definitely does not feel completely secure. And what usually follows is confusion and frustration because, from their point of view, they are doing what they believe they are meant to be doing. I know this pattern personally very well because I actually lived it for a long, long time myself. I really did understand this level, and I felt like I could really explain this work to anyone and how it applies to life. And yet there were still so many areas where I would either see improvements and then things would slip backwards, or I would feel like I couldn't even move forward in some areas, especially around finances and work. It wasn't always a dramatic failure. Sometimes it was subtle. It just felt like I wasn't secure, like nothing was permanent. It could be taken away at any point in time. And what I eventually realised was nothing new needed to be learned. What needed to change was the identity I was unconsciously returning to when there was uncertainty, when there was silences, when there was pressures and circumstances in my 3D reality. This is why things often work out briefly and then they stop feeling secure again and they start going back to where you were before. And what I realised was my initial position when I started sort of the manifesting journey was more open, and this is a time when you don't need to manage everything and when there's less tensions that you're feeling. But as results slow down and begin to pause, where you feel like you're going backwards, your system responds by tightening, by start trying to manage everything. And actually often nothing external has actually gone wrong, but the internal position where you were manifesting from has changed. So, what was once open, you are now becoming controlled in that area, and this is what blocks the manifestation. My name is Kathy Gifford, and my work sits around identity, self concept, and the law of assumption, grounded in Neville Goddard's teachings, but taught in a way that is like practical and embodied and lived. And I work with people who already understand this work on some kind of intellectual level, people who are reflective and self aware, not new beginners, but those who can feel that something just isn't fully stabilizing in their day to day reality yet. I don't teach motivation or basics. I correct where identity is leaking, so what you know actually becomes the way you live. This exact pattern is what I see time and time again, both what I went through in my own life and what people I do this work with go through too. Not beginners and not people who want to avoid responsibility and be in like victim mode, but people who are already engaged with this work and still find that things do not seem to hold for them. That was the point where it became clear to me that this wasn't about effort and just about belief. Something structural was missing. And in this video, I'm going to explain why things keep wobbling even when you're doing the work so you can stop second guessing yourself. Now, I found that most people start to interpret this experience as a personal failure. They assume they are not believing strongly enough or that they have lost some kind of focus, or they're just not being consistent in the right way and they tend to want to start again. So that can lead to responding by trying harder and like adding in more techniques, more check-in, more effort to stay in the right place internally. But I found this issue is not in the lack of knowledge or the lack of tools. It's not that you do not understand the concepts well enough, or even that you've not done enough inner work yet. The issue is instability. More specifically, it's instability in your inner position where there's uncertainty or lack of confirmation. And by inner position, I'm not talking about how you feel when things are going well. I'm talking about who you become internally when there is a silence, when there is a delay, when something is not moving or going the way that you expect it to. That is the version of you that life responds to. When things feel uncertain, most people don't notice that their system's tightening, their attention is narrowing, they're starting to try and manage everything, their control is increasing. It doesn't always feel like it's resistance. It feels like it's staying responsible because that's what we're taught in the 3D, to stay on top of things. But that internal tightening and control, it changes the position that you're living from again. And this usually shows up in like really, really ordinary ways that can be easy to miss. So you might be checking your phone more than you normally would. You might be rereading messages and wondering how it sounded like that. Or you might be mentally preparing for conversations that have not even happened yet. So nothing can look wrong on the outside. You're doing everything, but internally you're managing again instead of occupying. Now, identity instability rarely looks like doubt. More often, it looks like control. The mind is stepping in to oversee the process, monitor your constant progress, and prevent disappointment. The controlling posture feels sensible, but it quietly replaces the identity that was meant to be open to receive. Being open is not just a feeling and it's not just optimism, it's an identity position. And like any identity position, the state of the wish fulfilled is easiest to hold when things are moving, but it's actually harder to hold when things are silent or things are in delay or circumstances that you don't like are appearing. Understanding something, it's not enough. It doesn't mean your system knows how to live from it consistently. Insight, it doesn't equal stability, because stability is not about feeling good all the time and it's not about eliminating emotional reactions. It's about who you return to when these reactions and situations are happening and when they pass. This is usually the point where people find their way into my 8-day identity law of assumption challenge, because they can feel that understanding alone is just not going to resolve this. And the 8-day challenge, it actually exists to help people stabilize what they already understand by practicing what they return to when things feel uncertain. For those who already have a strong grasp of all of this work, but they want that deeper correction and deeper consistency, that work continues inside the Reset Mastermind. Now, Neville talks a lot about conscious awareness, but awareness alone, it does not create the openness. In many cases, it increases self-monitoring, because I found that people become very good at noticing every internal shift, every emotional change, every moment when there's tension and when there isn't. But without the stability that we need alongside it, that awareness turns into involvement and control again, because most people have never been taught how to train that return back to the state of the wish fulfilled. So when something feels off, they default back to their familiar patterns from their old identity. They analyze, they explain, they adjust the decision, and they look again for reassurance into their 3D reality. When your identity feels uncertain, effort usually starts to increase again by adding more focus, more check in, more internal adjustments again. It feels like commitment, but effort changes your posture. You're in a position that you take action and believe from again. It moves your system out of openness and back into control, which closes you off from overflow. And over time, this begins to create that sense that results are really fragile, like they're not for me, they're not stable, they're not here to stay. They work, but they don't seem to stay or hold. This is also why willpower does not solve the problem, because you cannot force an identity to stabilize just through effort alone. You cannot decide something once and expect it to hold if your system, your nervous system, has never practiced staying here under pressure. What people often call persistence is actually redeciding the same thing again and again. Real persistence, though, that is being able to return to the same inner position, that same inner state where the wish is fulfilled without renegotiating it. That capacity, it has to be trained within you. Identity, it cannot stabilize without direction, and many people jump straight into techniques without ever clearly choosing what they are orientating their life around, because desire is not a problem, it's just information. Desire tells you which version of you is trying to organize your behavior, your decisions, and your attention. So if that desire isn't clearly owned, identity has nothing to stabilize around, so it keeps on responding to whatever's happening next. And direction is not motivation, it's orientation. And that's what I want to get across to you. When direction is clear, identity has somewhere to organize itself around. Without direction, your system, your nervous system, stays responsive to whatever is happening in the moment, to the circumstances. It will react to feelings, to feedback, to all those circumstances instead of remaining positioned. Without evidence, identity remains abstract. So people then will then default back to their feeling states to assess whether they're aligned again. And that reliance on this feeling creates instability because feelings are responsive, they're not anchoring. Identity requires something more consistent to orientate around, and that momentary emotional feedback. Evidence is not about convincing yourself that something is working, it's about confirming the position you're living from. Small shifts in behavior, different decisions, and changes in your responses, they all signal the identity movement. And when those signals acknowledge, the identity has something to consolidate around instead of dissolving back into effort and doubt. That is why delay often disrupts direction. Neville called it the bridge of instance. Not because direction is wrong, but because identity loses its reference point again and moves back into management and mind control. Because when orientation changes, the identity will follow. And this is exactly the gap I feel like the Reset Mastermind, why I created it, what it exists to address, not by adding more information, but by giving you a clear structure for what to return to when things wobble. Because this is where I find most people fall off. And whether you come into the mastermind or just come and join the free 8-day Law of Assumption challenge, because it's the layer that I've created where you start to work so you can feel the difference between understanding something and then living from it. And if you feel like something's really landed here, check out my next video. I'm going to show you the exact moment identity collapses under pressure, the moment most people start to mistake this for losing belief, and what actually needs to be trained here.